Today I want to take a look at how to send an email message with an Azure runbook using Send-PNPMail. Now this requires a couple of prerequisites, inputs. First we're going to look at app registrations. Now of course this is part of Microsoft's Azure Active Directory, and app registration is the icon here with the blue squares, and that allows you to develop and set applications, granting them different APIs and access to your tenant. We want to take a look at two different scripts. The first is going to be registering an app, and the second is to use it. Our first block of code is to register an app called PnP PowerShell Demo, and this is going to be where we actually register the app definition. Now, for that, I want to take a look at the folder that I'm working in, make sure that any of the extra files are kind of removed, and effectively we're working with only the, yes, PnP register and send mail message. So we have only those two files, and we're going to go ahead and execute the first one to register. And when we execute this, it's going to want credentials. This needs to be a high permissioned account on your tenant. For this demo today, we are running with an account that has GA Global Admin for all the permissions we would possibly need, just to make sure it goes through successfully. And this is going to register a new application in Azure Active Directory. So let's see, we do have a pop-up window that comes forward when we run this. It will ask me to pick an account for login. We'll go ahead and complete the OAuth login flow. Okay. Okay, and as this command runs, we'll see a message that says wait 60 seconds to launch the consent flow in a pop-up window. This is required for Azure AD. I don't see the pop-up window yet. We do have our app registrations. We'll keep an eye on that to see if the new one shows. All right, waiting for any pop-up windows. After the 60-second delay, we do get our pop-up window, and here we have a consent screen where we need to review and accept the permissions requested. So this application would like to execute these different permissions. There's the name, PnP PowerShell Demo. It matches the name that we fed right in here for application name on our register command. So we'll go ahead and accept. Very cool. Yes, nice. All right. And with that part executed, going back to check our folder contents, we now have some new files. We have three of them, a PFX with a private key, a CER, public certificate, a text file. Cool. So we created our app. We have a certificate for authentication. And if I go check app registrations, I see the new app registration out here. It does exist, which is fantastic, and it has an application client ID. We need to copy that to be able to use it. So to use this, we want to get the client ID. We're also going to need the thumbprint of the certificate, and that one a little bit more detailed. We'll come in here to certificates on the app registration, and you can kind of see it, but it's kind of got this ... thing going, where it's truncating the text. It's interesting. But if you open DevTools and poke into the div tag, you can come over here and find the value itself and double click to copy paste. So if you ever see the truncated text like that in a web UI, just hit F12. It's a good way to get at it. And here we're going to open a connection to the tenant with the client ID and thumbprint. We're going to echo how many sites we have. We're going to change the name of the title of the root site collection. And the most important step of all, we're going to send an email message with this really cool command called Send-PNPMail. Totally different than on-prem with SMTP's Send-MailMessage. And a lot of you guys are probably familiar with Send-MailMessage. And just for a quick one on that, we can do the manual and Send-MailMessage with full usage. You see all the different parameters. This is how we did it on-prem for years and years, Send-MailMessage, and you needed to give it a server. You had to give it an SMTP server right there. and that was your relay to sending messages. With the cloud, we can lean on PnP and ask SharePoint to send the message for us and say, okay, here's where we want the message to go to. Here's our subject and body, and we're not going to tell you about a server. Let it figure out the routing, which is pretty cool stuff. So this is our goal, to run that particular code. Now for this to work in a local machine context, you have this new certificate authentication. We just created an app registration. It has some API permissions out here. At the moment, it has permissions to look at groups in SharePoint. We're going to need to add some permissions about mail. So let me go ahead and do that, and we'll get things lined up the way we need for the mail message. And we'll set that up. And for the mail permissions, we're going to click Add, come in here to Graph, and we'll type in the word mail. There it is. Send mail, yes. And there's a couple of different permissions regarding mail, and it would take a little bit more testing to narrow down specifically which exact ones are needed, if it's delegated or if it's application. Is it send mail on behalf of a given user or send mail more generally? For today, we're going to go ahead and grant all three of them just to make sure we have too many permissions, taking it higher. There are three possible permissions here. I'm granting all of them for the demo just to make sure we can get our message routed out. And if we're going to execute this code locally, that's fine. The thing about it is we need to load the certificate. If you run it right now, it says, I can't find the certificate in the certificate store. And why can't I find it? We haven't told it. We haven't installed it. We haven't registered it. There's no configuration completed for that. So here we're going to add remove snap-in. We're going to add certificates. We're going to do it for the local computer account and hit OK. Under the personal certificates, we're going to import and browse for a file. And this is where we're going to go grab the actually PFX that we generated. And we're going to give it the password from our private key, which over here we have a password. Super cool. And we'll mark it as exportable just so you can export for any later usage. Go ahead and finish. Import was okay. Clear the console. Execute the code again. Now it ran successfully. Really cool. And we know it can be successful because when we test our connection, it tells us how many sites we have. 53. Cool. If we do different get commands, it can echo back with content. If we do a set command to modify a web, then it can come back and show that timestamp and say, yes, we were able to change the title. We can put things like a date timestamp into the title of a site. We know we have a valid connection because we're reading and writing, and that is coming through our API permissions on the SharePoint side. Now here's the fun part. We highlight this and hit F8 to send the mail message command, and that ran successfully and went ahead and executed a send email action. Now to check that, we go out to Outlook Webmail and we go take a look at our inbox for our particular user account. And we'll come over here, logging in. There it is. And we have hello and a welcome to Crescent Inc. And that is our body and subject. And that's the mail message we just now sent. Go ahead and mark as read. So Send-MailMessage is a really cool way to route email using Azure Active Directory. The code that I'm showing here is all runbook compatible. One thing you'll notice is that all of the echo is simply a string on a line. There is no usage of write host. No need to. So this identical code could be added to an Azure runbook, and all you would have to do is feed it the certificate, the PFX file, and set your runbook with this particular code, and then also give it two dependencies, pnp.PowerShell and the Azure AD for just general Azure communication. That's what we'll take a look at in the next video, but this shows you how to register the app, grant it permissions, how to send the mail message, and do all of the necessary local debug steps. Because when we're working locally, it's a lot easier to set breakpoints, view the console, and go ahead and develop the code exactly the way it needs to be. Again, no use of write host, no use of transcript or logging, simply echoing strings. This gives us code that's very runbook friendly because write host is for interactive PowerShell. And this code is more runbook friendly, and that's what we'll look at in the next video. Thanks for watching.